We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research, and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the center of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 8th of May 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up,
I would think that perhaps as early as this week, we will be announcing trade deals with some of our largest trading partners.
The US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent promises great things, but are we really seeing signs of the end of instability? We'll examine the chances as the US and China sit down to talk tariffs. Also coming up in the next 60 minutes, it's emerged that discussions have been held between Israel and the US about Washington leading an administration in the war-torn strip of Gaza. Could the US try to run it? Plus, what made Newark lose its air traffic control radar?
43, I'm going to move you here because I just got told that the approach lost all their radars. 3 of their 4 radar screens went black and they have no frequencies.
We'll examine how a 90-second blackout has exposed the vulnerabilities of US airspace, plus the papers and a check-in with our team at the Venice Biennale. That's all ahead on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at what else is happening in today's news. Russia says it's begun a unilateral 3-day ceasefire in Ukraine. Kyiv's dismissed it, accusing Moscow of launching air attacks shortly after it was scheduled to have begun. The process of choosing a new pope continues today after black smoke appeared from the Sistine Chapel's chimney yesterday evening at the Vatican, signifying no one had been chosen yet. And ceremonies are being held to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, it's emerged that talks have been held between the United States and Israel about the possibility of Washington running an administration in Gaza. It's understood that the plan would involve the US leading a transitional government until safety and security in the Palestinian territory has been established. Well, to tell us more, I'm joined now by Julie Norman, lecturer in politics and international relations at UCL London. Very good morning to you, Julie.
Good morning, Emma.
And how have we got here? This seems like a rather sort of casual decision that's being made.
Well, I would point out that it's not a firm decision yet. These are pretty preliminary level discussions that are taking place. And pretty much what they're talking about is having some sort of U.S.-led administration in Gaza. I would point out that throughout the last 18 months, nearly all so-called day-after plans for Gaza have considered some type of international transition body. Usually that's been talked about in much more multilateral terms, either involving the UN, international powers, perhaps led by moderate Arab countries. This is really the first time that we've heard it discussed in terms of U.S.-led. With reports we're hearing are saying the U.S. would be inviting other countries to take part in this. I'm not sure who that would be yet. So this focus on the U.S. leading this and perhaps unilaterally is definitely something new. But again, something that has not yet been firmly decided.
What would the motives for Washington be to do this?
Well, it's a good question. On the one hand, you have a president who, in many ways, has been trying to, extract the United States from commitments overseas, wanted the U.S. out of the forever wars, et cetera. So to engage in a model that is literally being talked about as a model from the Iraq War seems to go against, Trump's instincts in that way. At the same time, though, I think most listeners will remember Trump's comments earlier from this year about a Gaza Riviera, about opportunities in Gaza, these kinds of things. And this, I imagine, would be some way that the U.S. would have some kind of foothold in Gaza for those opportunities, as well as serving a very vital role for their ally Israel.
Indeed, I mean, would it be as simple as that a widespread reaction to the announcement of these talks yesterday was for many people to think this is the first step in Donald Trump creating his Riviera?
I think that's certainly where many are seeing this. We've seen Trump's negotiations with Ukraine be very transactional, trying to get critical minerals. I think any further engagement in Gaza, which has been really put on the back shelf by the administration, would also probably have some transactional component, and this is likely what it is. I mean, I would say also, I think some of this is just trying to explore different opportunities to see how to kind of get past this current stalemate with the ceasefire. Trump is going to be visiting the Middle East next week. The administration wanted things in a better shape than it is by that point. And so far, my understanding is the Israelis have essentially said, we aren't moving on anything unless there's a U.S. commitment to some kind of transition hereafter. So a lot of this is in that space as well. And I think just trying to unlock this current impasse without really firmly committing. We hear Trump often throw out things like this, telling people what they want to hear, getting what he wants to hear back, but then pivoting to something else after.
What would happen to the people living in Gaza?
So I would point out that this is happening alongside these conversations as yet another realm of conversations where the U.S. is also involved. And that plan would involve actually moving displacing, I should say, Gazan civilians to what's being called a humanitarian kind of zone in the south, while Israel kind of takes over the rest of the strip and what they see is cleansing the strip of Hamas militants and whatnot. The U.S. does suggest it might be involved in that in the terms of U.S. private contractors. And that, I think, would have just an extremely devastating effect on an absolutely already devastated area in terms of displacing people yet again and putting about 2 million people in a quarter of the Strip's territory. This other plan that we're talking about now with a general administration, it's unclear what that would look like. Again, this is being talked about in the sense of a transitional period while Gaza is being quote unquote demilitarized, leading towards some other kind of governance. And so again, I think whatever happens after this war, if we get to a post-war point, is going to have some sort of administration like this, some sort of kind of technocratic group. But again, the real clutch here is that going to be a multilateral kind of group? Is it going to include Palestinian voices and participation, or is this going to simply be a U.S.-led operation in conjunction with Israel?
I mean, you mentioned a moment ago the United States' coalition provisional authority in Iraq that Washington established in 2003 after the US-led invasion that removed Saddam Hussein from power. That did not go well insofar as the United States was seen as an occupier, and the region suddenly, in its reaction to the United States became a target from that point onwards.
Absolutely. And I think anyone looking at this realistically would see that happening again. I mean, when you have Israel maintaining a presence, the U.S. with a history of occupation in the region very, very recently coming and assisting with that, they would be seen as an occupier. In my opinion, that would only increase insecurity for Israel in the sense of further mobilizing armed resistance, further mobilizing insurgency against both U.S. presence and Israeli presence in this strip. And I think anyone with a not too recent look back in history at Iraq can read the writing on the wall of how these things usually go, and it would be an extremely, extremely difficult and dangerous situation, I think, to try something like this.
So how could the United States make this work then?
Well, I think it would be very challenging for them to do so. Again, we have heard some, allusions in the comments that the U.S. would possibly be inviting other countries to take part. I think if this actually was a international sort of group that did involve other countries that have volunteered to play a role, including regional actors like the UAE, in which the US was sort of a managing, coordinating role. Something like that, I think, is potentially on the table. But again, most other states that would be willing to support a transitional period in Gaza will not if they just see it as supporting occupation, and most will not if it does not include some members of the Palestinian Authority, the recognized Palestinian leadership, which so far both Israel and the US seem to be not including in this plan.
The region itself has discussed some other day after plans. Where are we with them at the moment? I mean, would they mount a credible alternative, and arguably would Israel listen?
So there have been credible alternatives offered, and I think this is important to underscore that before as well as after Trump proposed his plan, we did see other proposals, again, from the UAE, from Egypt, from other regional actors that essentially also suggest a sort of transitional period, again, often with international assistance, and then leading to a reconstruction period, often with regional help. But again, those plans mostly rest on two things. One is the inclusion of Palestinian leadership from that Palestinian Authority, and second, for some kind of pathway towards Palestinian self-determination. And so far, Israel has said both of those things are a no-go. They don't want the Palestinian Authority to be part of any plan, and they definitely don't want any kind of pathway towards Palestinian statehood or self-determination at this time. So that is where a lot of these plans have kind of been roadblocked at the moment, but they are out there and they are still constantly being revised and worked on.
Julie, while I have you, can we briefly touch on some breaking news that's coming out of, most of the papers are now covering it at the moment, that Donald Trump is planning to announce a new trade deal with the United Kingdom, saying it could make Britain the first country to ease its commercial tensions with Washington. How significant a moment is this?
Well, it's definitely a significant moment for Starmer and for the UK. And, I think this is something that the UK government has been banking on, that they're the way they've been playing Trump, if you will, has been, largely hoping that he would pull back on these tariffs. And so far, I think we haven't heard exactly what will be announced today, but Trump alluded to a major trade deal with a big, highly respected country, which we assume is the UK. Right now, the UK is subject to about 25% taxes on steel and cars and other things. And so it would probably be lowering those. And so I think this is something that the Starmer government will definitely take as a win, and might be the first of several other trade deals that we see Trump making with likely Israel, India, and some of the South Asian countries.
Julie Norman, thank you as ever for joining us on Monocle Radio. You're listening to The Globalist. 14:12 in Beijing, 7:12 a.m. here in London. Now, Geneva will be the location this weekend of talks between the US and China, an event which it is hoped by almost everybody will bring to an end the instability of the tariff wars between the two countries. Negotiating teams are expected to talk about ways of reducing the tariffs, lifting restrictions on some companies and reintroducing exemptions for the imports of some low-value items. Well, Kerry Brown is director at the Lao China Institute at King's College London, author of The Great Reversal. A very good morning to you, Kerry.
Morning.
I've just given a couple of details, but could you flesh out what exactly, or do we know what exactly the US and China will be talking about?
Well, I think in the last few months they've been talking about the idea of a deal. The Chinese government has said it's always able to discuss a deal. It can negotiate. And the administration of the United States, I think Trump has several times talked about the idea of this big, beautiful deal. I think if you're going to talk about where the issues are, I think there are four. The first is Chinese buying of American goods. So what would the Chinese buy more from America? Because at the moment, there's about $550 billion of two-way trade. But a third of that is in America's interests, and two-thirds is China exporting to the United States. So there's an imbalance. That's something that's been the case for a long time, actually. The second is investment from China into the United States to create jobs and re-industrialize. And the third is, I think, an acknowledgement of American superiority institutionally in the global system. And finally, which is probably the most tricky, is China paying its way? I think America regards China as a freeloader. Public security goods in the Asia-Pacific region are mostly paid for by others, not by China, because it's regarded as being, not really an ally of the United States. So there's no trust. So those are the four big issues. Are any of them resolvable? I think it would be very, very difficult. A small deal may be possible, a symbolic deal. But for the simplest one, Chinese buying more American goods. Well, the only American goods that they particularly want to buy are semiconductors, which, of course, is not what America wants to sell them, and soya beans, which they can now get from Brazil and elsewhere. So I think it's difficult to see how they would come up with anything big, but they'll probably come up with things which are symbolic and get them out of the mess that they're in at the moment.
Indeed. I mean, is there a wider sense that this is just, as we stand, about de-escalating an already hugely damaging argument and trade war?
Yes, I mean, I think we can one scenario that we can kind of look at is the United States thought that China would cave in more quickly, than it has. It hasn't caved in. This is the issue. The Chinese have definitely not seemed to be panicked by this. They seem to have taken it in their stride. When the tariffs were imposed a few weeks ago, I think there was just shock and horror, and immediately China would need to do something, but it didn't. So politically, I mean, not economically, but politically, China has kind of got the edge here, just by the fact that it's still standing. Its economy is going through big stresses, but it's not completely dependent on one particular partner, and not even one as big as the United States. China's biggest trading relationships now are with the ASEAN, group of 10 Asian countries. It's $1 trillion of trade a year. With the European Union, it's also got about the same as it has with the United States. In the Global South, it's having extensive new trading partnerships. It's got options. So I think it's been a revealing moment, but not one that America has found particularly comfortable, despite all of the kind of rhetoric from Washington that China is caving in, that China is going to go, with its cap in its hand to Washington. It didn't. And that's in itself a big victory for Beijing. I
mean, because this has been hugely damaging to both the United States and China since it started at the start of March. I mean, we have extensive reports of, the port of LA seeing a big drop in container shipping arriving, and then that has that absolutely almost immediate knock-on effect that you don't have the delivery drivers, you don't have the stuff to put on American store shelves, people can't buy what they need, and inflation goes up. These are really, really quick and very damaging chain of events that follows.
Yes, it's an extremely high-stakes game. But at the end of the day, it's not the economics so much. That's serious, but it's the politics that lies after it. And China is, I suppose, its appetite to endure this suffering is higher, to be honest. I mean, I think for China, the stakes are that, making China great again is a deeper and longer held vision than making America great again. I mean, America has been great until recently, and China has been waiting for this moment for a long, long time after a very difficult modern history. So I think the idea of China being pushed into a corner and bullied by, the world's largest and most developed country, it just doesn't work in Chinese politics. I mean, I don't see how you can negotiate with Chinese easily. I don't see how you can negotiate at all by pushing them into a corner. I mean, I don't think that's ever worked. It's more likely that, you've got to be kind of very, very focused on what you want. And as I alluded to earlier, I'm not entirely clear that the Trump White House knows what it wants. I mean, I think what it feels is that America is being threatened and competed with by China, and it's frustrated and angry at that. In the last Trump administration in 2018, the then Vice President Mike Pence, in a very famous speech, talked about how China owes America, kind of for all the things that America has done, this idea of, helping in its development. I don't think the Chinese feel like that at all. And that is the problem at the heart of this idea of an obligation that America feels China has, that China doesn't feel it does have, and the desire for the two of them to basically find a world where they don't have to deal with each other much, but that world doesn't exist at the moment.
And that narrative that will come out. I mean, you've just mentioned the the way that, that China does not like to be put on the back foot by the United States. But the Trump administration, and in particular Donald Trump himself, will very much want to see any progress as a United States win.
Yes, I mean, that's what I think would be the ideal outcome. You want to come out of all trade negotiations, the two parties want to come out, or however many parties, saying they've all won. And you can kind of spin it so that you look like you're going to win. China, just to kind of survive the onslaught it survived, can say it's won. I mean, it didn't buckle. The United States, well, what would be a win for them? I mean, they have a president who can claim anything. So I'm sure no matter what happens, even if it's manifestly not a win, they'll claim it is. But for the future, where are we heading? I mean, the Chinese economy is the world's second largest, 20% of global GDP. It's not going to go away. The Chinese emerging middle class, 500 million people wanting a better lifestyle. They're still important sort of consumers, not only of goods, but of services. The most dynamic region on the planet, Asia, where China sits at the heart. Can America really, kind of pull the drawbridge on this? I don't think it can. So, although there'll be a different structure to the global economy, the fact is that these two will have to continue working with each other, even if it's to kind of control particular problems and threats from environment to AI to other issues. They can't ignore each other and pretend that they exist in different zones, which is what some people in the administration in Washington kind of dream up. It's not possible. So there will have to be an accommodation, and I suppose this will be whatever deal comes out of this, if it does come out, this will be a sign of the future, how they're going to work with each other when they clearly don't find it easy and don't want to sometimes.
Kerry Brown, thank you as ever for joining us on Monocle Radio. Still to come on today's programme.
Today, we celebrate another thrilling moment. The creation of a spectacular new Disney theme park resort coming to Abu Dhabi.
That's the Disney CEO there, Bob Iger, announcing plans to open the company's first Middle East theme park. We'll find out more a little later on The Globalist.
IQ, EQ and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Let's continue now as today's newspapers. Joining me in the studio, Simon Brooke, journalist, communications consultant, media guru, Simon.
too kind.
That's your online handle, isn't it? Great fun. How's life in the world of the media guru?
Well, as usual, with the Trump administration, we're sort of punch drunk, aren't we? With one announcement after another. So the New York Times this morning is reporting on that Donald Trump has announced, or will announce today, a trade deal with the UK. According to the paper, Donald Trump is expected to announce that the United States will strike a trade deal with Britain, according to 3 people familiar with the plans. Also a bit of a giveaway last night that the president posted on social media. Major trade deal with representatives of a big, highly respected country. His caps throughout that announcement. It's interesting this because obviously Donald Trump has claimed to have these 200 deals ready to go, but then had to admit on Tuesday that he didn't actually have any ready to sign, so this will obviously be very good news for the Trump administration.
Yeah, someone should help Mr. Trump with his keyboard. He seems to get it all stuck on caps lock all the time. Maybe we should just help him unbutton that particular issue. We had Julie Norman a little earlier on talking about the fact that this is a really important moment for the United Kingdom. That, this will be seen as a political victory for Keir Starmer and his team. Trying to organise a trade deal with the United States has been a very, very long time in coming. And it has just been, I think we can go trace it right back to Obama, can't we?
Absolutely. And also also, if you put this, again, looking at it from this side of the Atlantic here in London, if you put this into the context of Brexit, this is the kind of deal that those who campaigned nearly 10 years ago now for Britain to leave the EU, this is the kind of thing they've always talked about. So, yeah, exactly. It'll be great news for the Trump administration, but also across the political spectrum, I would say, here in the UK. The Labour government will be very pleased to be the ones who can ink this deal, but obviously people on the right who are very keen on Brexit will also be delighted and will be pointing at it. I have to say the New York Times does have expert comment pointing out that this is just an agreement to start negotiations, identifying a framework of issues to be discussed in the coming months. And let's not get too excited.
We're not there quite yet.
Not quite yet, no.
Someone needs to tell Donald Trump that. Let's move on to the forging of closer and further ties between Russia and China. We have Xi Jinping in town in Moscow today.
Exactly. So the Moscow Times, not Vladimir Putin's favourite publication, but always interesting to get some perspective on what is happening in Russia. Yeah, exactly. So Xi Jinping is in Moscow for the Victory Day parade. And the Moscow Times reminds us that the visit comes with rising China-US tensions over US trade tariffs. It also quotes an article from Russia's Rossskaya Gazeta newspaper published yesterday in which President Xi hailed resilient China-Russia ties and called for other countries to stay out of the relationship. There's an interesting statement quoted from the Chinese Foreign Ministry in this piece. It says that leaders would, quote, rally the global south, which I think is really interesting, this idea with an assumption perhaps that the world is generally in favour of Ukraine and Europe and is against Russia and China. Well, not according to many people in the global south. And also it talks about promoting an equally and orderly multipolar world. So again, emphasising this move away from the US having this dominant position. I did laugh cynically when I saw that it also talked about unequivocally opposing acts of unilateralism and bullying. I mean, isn't what Russia and China...
That's their shtick.
Worst, exactly. The worst example, isn't it? But anyway, it's interesting as well that this will apparently be the grandest ever Victory Day parade. And I think given the problems that Putin is facing, you can see why he wants to make such a big deal of it.
Let's move on to a very strongly worded comment piece in the Times by Edward Lucas, who says we all need Friedrich Merz to make Germany strong again. Despite a rocky start, new Chancellor is the best hope for holding back the AfD, excuse me, which is a far-right party, and saving Europe. I mean, there was a sort of collective gasp of exasperation 2 days ago when what we all expected would be a neat, convenient and conclusive vote for Friedrich Merz turned into a mess.
Whoops, yes, absolutely. So he didn't get the smooth approval, as you say, that he was expected to get. Edward Lucas points out that this is perhaps partly due to what he describes as Merz's abrasive, mercurial style, which feeds abundant grudges. But really the point that this piece is making is that whatever you think of Merz, and he does face an awful lot of domestic challenges. The most important point is that he brings with him an opportunity for Germany once again to play its role as sort of leading Europe, and sort of concerns about that under Gerhard Schröder, under Angela Merkel, under his immediate predecessor Olaf Scholz, you had a lot of ambiguity towards, ambivalence even towards Russia, and a real concern about not taking the world stage and being an international leader. That will change, according to Edward Lucas. Merz is a lifelong Atlanticist, he says, but he says that Europe's absolute priority, according to Merz, is to become independent of the US as soon as possible.
Finally, a brilliant article in The Conversation about why we have smoke coming out of the Sistine Chapel when they are electing a pope.
Yeah, I love the conversation, and this looks at the chemistry actually of this famous indicator, whether we have a pope or not, habemus papem or not. So apparently, burning the ballot papers to maintain secrecy of voting goes back at least to the 15th century, but it wasn't until the 18th century when a chimney was installed in the Sistine Chapel to protect Michelangelo's frescoes from soot that the resulting smoke became visible for everyone to see. And of course, public became fascinated by it. In the 19th century, if you didn't get any smoke, you didn't get a pope, just so you know. But then the thing of fumata nera, black smoke, and fumata bianca began. And so if you're interested in the chemistry anyway, to make it really clear which colour we're going for, the clear black smoke recipe is caused by something called potassium perchlorate. And the white smoke, get this right, is potassium chlorate. So subtly different there, but a really different signal. And I suppose now we know the chemistry, we could all use it in our daily lives to signal yes, no, please, not please.
I don't know what's happening in the Brooke household, but there's plenty of speculation among friends and family about really practical things about what goes on in the Sistine Chapel. Can you take a cup of coffee in there, or is it strictly no liquids?
What if you want to go to the loo?
Well, this is another thing that we've all been talking about at home, is that they're not young.
No, exactly.
So, do they set up special facilities? It's one of those things that you just really dig down into humans being locked in a room.
It is so bizarre, isn't it? That the psychology, the biology, even as you say. I mean, I don't know how it works, but I did enjoy the film Conclave. That gave us some insights, but I'll be certainly watching more closely the smoke when it emerges now.
Thank you, Simon Brooke.
You.
The time here in London is 30 minutes past 7:30 a.m. A quick look now at the rest of today's headlines. Russia says it's begun a unilateral 3-day ceasefire in Ukraine. Kyiv has dismissed it, accusing Moscow of launching air attacks shortly after it was scheduled to have begun. Ukraine has repeated its call for a longer 30-day truce. The process of choosing a new pope will continue today after black smoke appeared from the Sistine Chapel's chimney yesterday evening at the Vatican. That signalled that cardinals had failed to elect a new pope in the first vote of their conclave. And ceremonies are being held to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. There'll be a service in Vienna and a gathering in Prague. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Now it's time for one of the other stories we're following today. Here's a piece by Monocle's Toronto correspondent Thomas Lewis, in which he talks about how Canadian shipbuilders could be helping to bolster South Korea's military. Thomas's piece is voiced by Monocle's Tom Webb.
3 South Korean defence firms have made a pitch to the Canadian government to replace its Navy's ageing submarine fleet, bolster its Army's firepower on land and spur Canada's defence industrial and maintenance bases at home. It's an ambitious move that seeks to expand upon a defence pact signed by then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau 2 years ago, capitalising on recent moves from Ottawa to diversify its defence procurement away from US manufacturers amid ongoing trade tensions. The first proposal would see shipbuilders Hanwha Ocean and Hyundai Heavy Industry join forces to deliver 4 new submarines to the Royal Canadian Navy by 2035, far quicker than the Navy's own deadline currently stipulates. The deal, valued at up to 24 billion Canadian dollars, would also see the construction of manufacturing and maintenance facilities in Canada for the new vessel's upkeep. Its sister's company, Hanwha Aerospace, has also proposed to re-equip the Canadian Army with mobile howitzers and rocket-propelled artillery. This would also entail establishing maintenance centres in Canada, a move endorsed by Canada's new Prime Minister Mark Carney, as he seeks to diminish Canada's reliance on the US. As traditional trading and defence relationships are reviewed amid the shifts in US trade and defence policy, South Korea is opting to see the opportunities.
And my thanks to Thomas Lewis and to Tom Webb too. For more from Monocle's editors and correspondents, sign up for our free daily newsletter, The Monocle Minute, at monocle.com/minute. What's gone wrong with American air traffic control? This week, it emerged that the system operating at Newark Airport shut down entirely, albeit for less than 2 minutes, but long enough to have a lasting effect on the arrival and departure of subsequent flights. The shutdown has led to wider questions being asked about the way the air traffic control system works and whether it does so safely. Well, I'm joined now by Paul Charles, founder and CEO of luxury travel and trade consultancy, the PC Agency, and the former director of Virgin Atlantic and Eurostar. A very good morning. Welcome back, Paul.
Hello, Emma.
So what do we know about what happened at Newark?
Essentially, Newark has been facing issues that have lasted for well over a year or so, relating to outdated technology and poor staffing. And what we've been seeing in one of America's busiest air corridors is essentially mistakes being made by air traffic controllers due to outdated technology and lack of communications among its air traffic controllers, who were moved to Philadelphia, some 100 miles from Newark, and as a result have not been able to stay in touch adequately with their colleagues in Newark Airport itself.
I mean, are you shocked by the revelations here? Because I think the picture that many are now painting of what actually goes on in the United States air traffic control, and you talked about lack of technology and staffing issues as well. I mean, I read somewhere that they're saying they're still using floppy disks and copper wire to keep planes in the air.
Sadly, across the US, not just in this, one of the busiest air corridors, there is a lot of outdated technology in the air traffic control systems. They haven't been updated for over 20 years in some cases. There's been a massive shortage of staff at many air traffic control sites across the US due to the stressful nature of the work. So I'm not surprised at all. Sadly, unless things are sorted out urgently, there's a danger of more incidents, such as we saw with the deadly collision by Ronald Reagan Airport in January and the sad loss of life there. These are really busy operations. You're talking about 1,200 flights a day at Newark Airport, 1,300 flights a day at JFK Airport, 600 flights a day at LaGuardia Airport in New York. And when you combine all of these, you can see why it's a very tense and stressful role being an air traffic controller, especially if you're dealing with outdated technology.
Why is this such a problem, given the fact that, one would imagine that air traffic control would be kept up to date?
You would imagine that, especially as it's such an important sector and very high profile, of course, with so many thousands of people using the airspace every day. Essentially, the Federal Aviation Administration has had to cut back over the last few years. They've been starved of resources. They've also moved air traffic controllers from a facility on Long Island over to Philadelphia, a long way from Newark Airport. So Newark Airport has been suffering due to that move, due to controllers being stretched, the technology not working effectively. And now the FAA is saying it's going to urgently replace some of that technology, update the fiber optics, improve communications. But the problem is, if you're an air traffic controller and you've had to deal with this, you will be stressed. You will have taken time off for trauma, for the near miss potential that dogs air traffic controllers every day. That's what they are trained for and also worry about. And it's only a matter of time unless the FAA pumps a lot more money in before there's another serious incident.
That will take time, but the commercial implications are absolutely immediate. I mean, we're seeing the likes of United cutting flights from Newark because they say that they need to protect their customers. There is a desperate commercial need as well, isn't there?
There is. I mean, airlines operate on safety, as do airports. It's the number one priority. It's the first thing you're taught when you work in an aviation environment. And United have had to cut 30 to 40 flights per day out of Newark. There have also been many cancellations, of course. And Newark is a very, very important backup airport for those who don't want to fly into JFK. Newark is slightly smaller. It's easier to get out of the airport when you arrive. It's faster often at immigration. It's handling, whilst it still handles many international flights, it's handling fewer than JFK. So the passport and immigration facility is much quicker to get through. So there are many advantages to Newark Airport, but obviously the underfunding, the lack of resourcing, not just at Newark but elsewhere in the US as well, is severely hitting the reputation of air traffic control in the US.
Paul Charles, thank you as ever for joining us on Monocle Radio. It's 8:38 in Venice, 7:38 a.m. here in London. Now we're heading to Venice because the Biennale is kicking off. Nick Moniz is Monocle's design editor. He's there for us. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Emma Nelson.
Now, the last time you did a check-in for me from Italy, it was from Salone in Milan, and you were in a car. Not possible where you are today. So where are we? And what are we looking at?
What are we looking at? I'm currently looking at men fixing a palazzo and loading timber onto, I guess, barges you'd call them. They're certainly not gondolas, but we're in Venice. We're on a canal just off San Marco Square. A little bit touristy, if I'm honest, but it was nice to be quite central as I kind of bounce across the city for the Biennale.
Indeed. I mean, being touristy is something that, yeah, it's Venice. But the wonderful thing is what you've just described is this idea of industry and construction happening in the middle of Venice, all on the water. And every time the Biennale starts, it's one of those absolute wonders of how do they do this? Yeah,
I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. I love this city. Come here usually a couple of times a year, and every single time I'm in awe. Just what they've been able to build, on what is essentially swampland is sensational. And I think that's why this is a perfect setting for an architecture biennale. It shows the power of the built environment and our ability, as architects, as people, to work with prevailing conditions. And Venice is. It is I don't know what you call it, like a meeting point of kind of all the global architecture and design issues that we have. You've got rising sea levels here. They're tackling over tourism. They're dealing with heritage buildings. So it's kind of the perfect setting to have these discussions about how we can build better.
Indeed. I mean, when you read about the Biennale's curator Carlo Ratti talking about architecture as survival and the Biennale being a sort of a living laboratory of ideas that places architecture very much in the spotlight.
100%. And what's fascinating is the theme this year is centered around intelligence. And over it kind of kicked off yesterday with a press preview. And what I noticed more than anything was it seemed to be about human intelligence centered around conversation. It was fascinating how many different national pavilions I visited, because each country has the opportunity to have a national pavilion where they can present work from architects from their home country, exploring ideas they feel are particularly relevant either to them or to the globe. And everyone seemed to be talking about the importance of conversation in terms of building and sharing intelligence. So I swung past the Australia pavilion. They're talking about listening to each other and then building. Switzerland is talking about having dialogues between two different architects and how you can kind of bring a new architecture into an existing building. Japan itself was also talking about listening to its own building and what it can learn when you're doing a renovation. There's all these kind of conversations. It all felt very conversation centered, which I think is kind of beautiful. And I think that's perhaps why so many people have come to Venice.
Tell me about which pavilions have caught your eye, because this is the glorious thing that each nation is allowed to and has to make its own national yet global mark.
I mean, I am biased, but this year Australia actually was very, very good. It is very, very good. This runs until November, obviously. And what I particularly liked about it is they kind of built a conversation amphitheatre, I guess is what you'd call, or a space that it's kind of a circular wall with a gravel floor in the centre of the pavilion, and it kind of invites you to come and sit. And the nature of the curving wall means you kind of face each other. You might start having conversations, and then that's kind of surrounding it is a host of different objects made off the back of conversations between young designers and the curators. And what I like about it is that it lets the architecture and the installation do the talking more so than a written thesis on a wall, which actually still happens. And it surprises me every single time that countries will just come in and essentially pin up huge Word documents. This is architecture is meant to be experienced. It's meant to be felt, and I want to live and feel the living example of it, not just have to read through. As an editor, I have to read all the time, so it's not even that. It's just I don't want to come here and read through a host of different documents explaining why we should build better. I want to be shown how we can build better, and I think Australia does that really, really well.
Anyone building any future architectural pavilions? Nick Moniz has just told you. Just tell me where else you're excited to go. I mean, if you would be kind enough to step out of Australia for a moment.
Oh, come on, Emma. I mean, the UK pavilion was outstanding as well, but maybe let's not go there just because then I've done Australia and the UK, the two places I live. The Swiss pavilion in particular, I mentioned that at the top, was really, really nice in that it was kind of looking at this amazing building, I think, from the 50s, and it was looking at what would have happened if a different architect had been commissioned to design the pavilion. So to do so, they've kind of inserted an architectural installation in its centre, inspired by the work of Switzerland's first registered female architect, Elisabeth Sachs. So she had these kind of radial forms, and they contrast with the original designer, Bruno Giacometti's kind of very boxy structure. And what I liked about that, and this is coming back to the theme of conversation, it's not just conversations between people, but it's conversations between different types of architecture. So you have this kind of linear boxy architecture with these radial insertions, if that makes sense. I don't know, it's a hard picture to paint, but what I liked is that it demonstrated that architecture evolves, we can build on it, we can bring new ideas to existing buildings. It's not always tabula rasa that needs to take place.
Quickly, you have about 10 seconds to tell me why we're all going to be starting to drink canal water.
That's on my agenda today. So I'm off to the Arsenale, which is a big presentation space, and there's a process there where they're converting canal water into coffee. I'm Australian. I'm a coffee snob. Coffee in Venice isn't that good right now, so this must get better.
Have you seen a Venice ambulance that will be taking you to the hospital? It's a boat, Nick. Be careful.
I haven't, but to be honest, I love being on a boat, so maybe not so bad.
OK, we wish you the very best of luck with that. Nick Moniz in Venice for us. You're listening to The Globalist.
Each of us has a craft, a calling that inspires us. Whether it's how a coffee is brewed, a chair is built, or how money is looked after. There's a love for the work, a care that compels you forward. For us at UBS, it's about designing a unique outcome for you. Because whatever your craft may be, ours is built around helping you succeed. UBS. Banking is our craft.
It's 15:46 if you're listening in Tokyo, 7:46 here in London. Let's head to the Japanese capital now to talk about Asian news with Fiona Wilson, our Tokyo Bureau Chief, joining us now from our studio there. A very good afternoon to you, Fiona. How's the studio looking today?
Well, the studio is quite dark, as it should be, but it is the most fantastic sunny day here. So overall, amazing weather.
Glad to hear it. I never thought I'd be talking on Monocle Radio about the price of rice in Japan.
Well, look, it may not matter to people sitting in London, but it's a big deal here. So what's been happening in Japan? I mean, obviously Japan, like everywhere else, affected by inflation massively. But one of the really staple products that's gone up just enormously is rice. And for, Japanese cooking, it's everything. It's in every lunchbox. It's in bento boxes. It's in kids' rice balls. Convenience stores are filled with it. And the price has gone up. At the last count, it was 17 consecutive weeks it's gone up in price. And it's now reached sort of the equivalent of about $30 for 5 kilos. And when you know how much rice was, last year it was about half that price. It's a huge, huge chunk of the family budget. So there's a lot of disquiet.
I bet there is. I mean, and what are people doing to sort of mitigate for this? Are we getting smaller bento boxes, or is there a major uprising on the cards?
Yeah, the famous shrinkflation that we do seem to be seeing here, where things look a bit smaller than they used to in the convenience store. Yeah, I mean, I think people are probably economizing. A lot of people talking about inflation in all directions, whether that's how much they were spending during Golden Week, that we've just had a week of holiday. Same true with the rice. Some convenience stores are mixing rice with a bit of barley, which is cheaper, so they can keep the price roughly where it was. But I just read a whole story about the increased price of the rice ball in convenience stores. So people are taking it very seriously in Japan.
How do they fix this?
Well, I mean, the government stockpiles rice and, like any commodity, they can release some into the market. But it seems that at the moment, there's just not enough around. And oddly, simultaneously, we've also had a very unusual sight a few weeks ago in Tokyo, was tractors piling through the city, farmers demanding a more stable income. They say they're not earning enough money and that they need the government to step in to stabilise their income. So generally, agriculture, in a slightly shaky place, and the Japanese just cannot do without their rice.
One thing that they are going to do without is ties on the subway, or rather the Tokyo subway staff are doing away with the tie. A revolution, one would say, in uniform.
I mean, I think I've been here too long, because I got on the subway at the weekend and thought, excuse me, why is this guard not wearing a tie? And I looked into it, and it turns out from the 1st of May, they don't have to wear a tie anymore. And, they do have a very smart uniform. They have a nice jacket, a shirt, but they usually wear a tie. And now they've dispensed with the ties. They've said people can dye their hair, which is another revolution. And they're allowed to wear more jewellery than simply a wedding ring. One accessory allowed. They're not allowed to be absolutely covered in gold and silver. But they're trying to, I think they're trying to open up the workforce and maybe not have it quite so restrictive. They're not doing a gendered uniform anymore. And they said basically they're just trying to keep up with the times. But it's interesting, if you're very used to the Tokyo metro style, it does look slightly more casual than usual. And also, it gets very hot here in the summer, and they have a thing called Cool Biz. We've definitely talked about it over the years, where summer dress, formal summer attire gets a bit more casual, and metro workers are being treated the same way. So from April to, November, really, at this point, the summer is so long now, really, they're able to open those top buttons and definitely not have to wear ties.
And what's been the reaction to this? I mean, clearly the Japanese are having to deal with some pretty sort of like big news, more expensive rice and subway workers without ties. Has this been generally accepted as something which is a good thing, that it's progress?
You're right. I mean, change is always hard, isn't it? I think change here is really noticeable. I think when it comes to price rises, just as long as I was in Japan, there were no price rises. So that has been a really big change. The metro uniform, I think that's caused less of an earthquake, to be honest. But I think, they said they were very careful to stress that even if they dispense with the ties, that the staff would still be as trustworthy as ever. And I think, when it comes to transport, people expect the staff here to be keeping things running absolutely on time. So hopefully that won't change.
And finally, we need to talk about yet another threat to Japanese tradition, that people don't want to get married because they don't want to take their partner's names. What is happening where you are? Fiona.
Do you think I should have thrown in a slightly more optimistic story? No, look, this is not a negative story, really. It's just an issue that's been rumbling on for years. I mean, basically, the rule in Japan is that a married couple has to have the same surname. It doesn't have to be the man's surname. The man can take the woman's name, but they just have to have the same name. And increasingly, people are feeling like, well, I've already started a career with maybe the name my maiden name, and I don't want to give it up. And it causes all sorts of complications. People have said if passports don't match with work names, that it affects all sorts of things, and you have to change your driving license and everything. But it's surprisingly controversial, this business, and it's really been discussed. I have to say it's been seriously discussed since about 1996. And recently, we've just had a bill put through the Diet, which I don't think will necessarily make it this time. But the bill by the opposition party, which is to do away with this rule and say that dual surnames, perfectly OK.
Fiona Wilson in our Tokyo bureau, thank you so much for joining us on The Globalist. You're listening to Monocle Radio. Finally, on today's programme, Abu Dhabi has been chosen as the next location for a Disney theme park. It'll be a collaboration between Disney and a local leisure developer, Miral. Mustafa Al-Rawi is a journalist and writer based in the UAE. He joins me now. Very good morning to you, Mustafa.
Good morning, Emma. It's big news.
And we've had the big reveal. So what's in the plan?
It will be the sixth Disney resort around the world, adding to Hong Kong, Shanghai, Euro Disney, and of course the two in the United States. The expectation is in the next 6 or 7 years, it will be designed, built and opened on Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. It'll be something on the water and is expected to be, according to the announcement, the most high-tech and immersive Disney theme park yet.
Why have they chosen Abu Dhabi as the location?
The location is actually the main point here, because not only do you have a purpose-built area on Yas Island, which is similar to, people know Singapore, Sentosa, similar to that island as well, but also the location of the UAE close to markets such as India and Africa, which over the next sort of 10, 20 years are expected to see the fastest growth, and there'll be huge demand. So if 15 years ago, Disney was expanding in Asia with its theme parks there, and that kind of heralded, the emergence of China as an economic superpower, perhaps this choice of this location in Abu Dhabi is also a nod to where the global growth is going to be quickest.
Indeed, because the potential for a huge number of visitors is huge here, given the fact that, as you say, it's the region. This is the first time that it's been that Disney's landing in the region.
There's been lots of research on the economic effects of Disney, both inside the US and outside as well. And it does create jobs. It does support the development and investment on infrastructure, property prices, transport, the ripple effect on airlines, hotels. It will really give a boost to not just tourism, but the wider economy as well. And kind of Disney is the theme park. So there are a number of theme parks already on Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. Warner Brothers was a very, very interesting development, as well as Ferrari World and others. But really, when Disney says they're coming, that's the big show.
And it seems to be a sort of a convenient announcement being made just before Donald Trump turns up.
Yes, the visit of the US president is pretty big, and there's anticipation of lots more to come. But that's still a week away, which, as we know these days, is a lifetime away. So it feels as if the announcement's been made as much now so that it doesn't get swallowed up by maybe other big announcements that could come, both politically and economically, from the president's visit.
The way that this is the boss of Disney, Bob Iger, said that the park will be authentically Disney and distinctly Emirati. What do we think he means by that?
I can only speculate that means the experience when you come to the theme park will mean that maybe it's an Arab Mickey Mouse. I don't know, but certainly there'll be a flavour of where you are. It won't just feel like you're in Anaheim or in Florida. You will know you're in Abu Dhabi. What is
what are the big Disney, the areas of Disney that that the Middle East actually is drawn to, because there is a wholesomeness to Disney, which would arguably be a very, very popular thing.
Yes, there's family-friendly entertainment for sure, but in recent years, Disney has swallowed up famous franchises like Star Wars and Marvel. So really, the potential is absolutely huge in terms of capturing people's attention. And it seems like Disney just keeps growing in terms of the content it's putting out. But certainly, the historically famous characters, like I mentioned, Mickey and co, as well as all the kind of fairy tale characters, the ones that probably are going to be in most people's minds, particularly for family entertainment. But Disney is such a big draw across demographics and across sort of stratas of society that there should be something for everyone.
Mustafa Arawi, thank you so much for joining me on The Globalist. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers, Laura Kramer and Monica Lillis. Our researcher was Francesca Jilks and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield, with editing assistance from Flynn Simons. After the headlines, more music on the way. The briefing's live at midday here in London. The Globalist is back at the same time tomorrow. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.